Can you guys hear me? Okay. Can someone say something? I can test the audio.
Good morning.
Okay, good. Thanks.
And thanks everybody for your patience. I'm sure Candace already said this before I got on here, but we just ended another webinar. So everybody's finding their way over to this other webinar is so that we can get started. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, we're ready. Okay,
Hi,
let's do this.
Sandeep. Yeah, we're ready to
Okay,
get going.
so you're gonna kick it off. I'll
Right.
do some of the presentation, and then I'm going to give it to Nicole when it comes to that 11 category. So just an FYI. So Parla, after that, when we are starting that last two slide about the 11 categories, promote Nicole as a as presenter.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just wanted to briefly introduce our broadband team. I'm Candace Hamana. I'm the tribal liaison here at the Commerce Authority. We have Aaron Larandos, who is our digital equity manager. Sandeep Bowman is the director of the Arizona broadband team. Vanessa Figueroa is our grants manager. Crystal Severse is our GIS and mapping coordinator here at the office. And then we have Perla Lopez, who is our broadband program manager, excuse me. Thank you all for joining us today. I know that from the conversations I'm having with our tribal folks is people are coming in at different phases of understanding as far as where we're at through these programs. Right now, we have submitted both of our drafted documents to the federal government and TIA, who is going to review and give us a final approval. And so what Sandeep wants to do now is talk about, once those approvals are done, how we're moving forward into the next phase of the BEAD program specifically. For some of the folks that are joining for the first time, I will be sending an additional email out later on this afternoon to with the links for the 5-year action plan for BEAD, the BEAD Volume 1, and then BEAD Volume 2. And it might not make a lot of sense for some of you joining brand new, but understand that I'm here as a resource. I will make sure that if you have any questions, if I don't have the answer, definitely will reach out to the colleagues that are here on the team, and we'll make sure that we get back to you. So with that being said, Sandeep, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Candace. Really appreciate your introduction and Thank you everyone for taking your time and attending the BEAD Challenge Process webinar this morning. This is our continuous effort to educate our tribal leaders, tribal stakeholder regarding the BEAD Challenge process. And this will be a continuous process for next upcoming few months to make sure that we are fully working with our stakeholders and educating and informing all of you regarding how this challenge process will play a vital role in sub-grantee selection process for the billion-dollar BEAD funding deployment. I just want to highlight one thing. This call is for our tribal stakeholder, tribal nonprofit entities, and tribal ISPs. I'm seeing names who are from ISPs. I would politely request this is not the right forum for you. The ISP calls are going to be a different slot tomorrow. So I would highly encourage you to join that call. Again, this is to make sure that our tribal, we have federally 22 recognized tribe, and it's a priority for us. And it's a really highest priority for the governor as well, to make sure that tribes are fully served. So this is a separate call for them, and it was done intentionally. So if you are from an ISP, which I can see from the list, I would politely request you to attend the ISP session tomorrow.
And just while we're getting to the folks who are here, I did share the link to the list of all of the upcoming webinars in the chat if you're looking for additional sessions to join.
Thank you. And I will start. Let me share my screen. Okay. Thank you all again for taking your time and joining this webinar. As I said, this is going to be a continuous effort to educate our stakeholder and inform our stakeholder about our activities, and also the process that how can tribal government and tribal stakeholder or tribal ISPs can participate into the challenge process. What is challenge process? So challenge process is one of the mechanisms put in place by NTIA and the federal government to make sure that this is the last stop before we start distributing the $1 billion state of Arizona received. And this is also the last stop when we can correct the map if there is any mistake in the map, if there is any error in the map where a location which is technically not served but was marked as served in the map, or the subscriber in a tribal land is not receiving the speed they are supposed to receive. So there is a mechanism, or there is a point put in the process so that we can determine and correct all those flaws in the map before we distribute the $1 billion. So it's definitely a key step towards achieving the BEAD goals. So all underserved, unserved location and eligible CAI, Community Anchor Institute, must be identified to achieve the BEAD program goal of providing affordable high-speed broadband to all Arizonans. The improved data quality. This is an evidence-based, fair, transparent, and expeditious BEAD challenge process as outlined in the NOFO and the challenge process notice policy. The accurate result, efficient process will make sure that we are distributing the $1 billion in an effective manner. Also, this is, as I mentioned, this is the last stop before gathering all the right information before we distribute the $1 billion through a sub-grantee selection process. So this is very vital for tribal government to participate, and also make sure that any areas which has current federal commitment, which is the biggest concern for the tribal government as of today, are being vetted as per the standard of the State Broadband Office to make sure that we're opening up those areas with BEAD funding if necessary. So who can participate into the challenge process? There are only a handful of organizations who can participate into the challenge process. which is an unit of local or tribal government. So if you are part of the tribal government, a chapter house, or directly a council, you can sign up and you can challenge for tribal areas. And broadband service provider. So in this case, I would say if you are a broadband service provider from a tribe or tribal telecom, you can register and submit a challenge process. And nonprofit organizations. So let's have a look. What is an allowable challenge, or what is not allowed as part of this challenge? There are too many terms going around. So one challenge process, I assume a lot of the tribes went through when FCC released a map almost 18 months ago. That was a location challenge process. This challenge process, which we are running as a state broadband office, is not a location challenge. It's availability challenge on the existing location. So in this challenge process, we'll be allowing challenges on the following grounds. One is the BEAD eligibility determination for broadband serviceable location. That means we'll be publishing a list of served location, unserved location, and underserved location. It is very important to look at that list, and that list will be published as an Excel spreadsheet as well as implemented in the challenge process map we are developing. And understand in your each and every single specific tribe if those any location which is marked as served are actually served, any location which is unserved or underserved is actually unserved or underserved. So we will publish that list to make sure that we are all on agreement which location are served, unserved, and underserved. The enforceable commitment for existing BSL. This is the from our state broadband office, this is the most important factor I think need to be determined during this challenge process between the state broadband office and the tribes. So as you probably know that there are a lot of direct funding, as an example, USDA funding, RDOF funding, ECAM funding, or other USDA funding and other state or local funding directly came here in Arizona, and that did not go through the state broadband office. All of those data was collected by NTI and refined, and it was delivered to the state broadband office as an enforceable commitment area. So if you, as a tribe, have an enforceable commitment through RDOF from any entity which you never communicated with, or any entity which never have any discussion with you regarding that, you can submit a challenge, and tribes will have an unique position to decline this kind of projects. Any projects which is happening in the tribal land, including the BEAD project, will have to have the consent from the tribal government before even we or any ISP build anything. So the existing commitment from enforceable commitment is very important for the tribes. It's very important to log into that portal we will be releasing, or check the data, or recently check the FCC data to see where the enforceable commitment in your tribe, and then go from there. Planned or existing service for existing BSL. That means if a tribal telecom or an outside entity in partnership with tribes are planning to invest, or by themselves planning to invest in certain portion of the tribe and covering a certain number of BSL, that can be submitted by outside entity, and we will read out that plan to you so that you can submit a rebuttal if you feel like that's not the carrier should be you are planning to accept in your tribe. Also, the identification of eligible community anchor institute as defined in volume 1. So in our volume 1, we identified categories for eligible community anchor institute. And also, as part of the volume 1, we published a list of community anchor institute as per the category, and also with the information that which one has a 1 gig symmetrical connectivity and which one doesn't have 1 gig symmetrical connectivity. If there is in a community anchor institute we missed from, which aligns with the category we have published from the tribes, you can submit or add that location as a community anchor institute. The BEAD funding will be deployed to connect based on the funding availability. So those are the 5 major category where we will be accepting challenge. Unallowable challenges are addition of a BSL and removal of a BSL. So we cannot accept a challenge where you are trying to add a BSL location, meaning a location, a household in the map. That challenge still can be submitted, but not to us. It can be submitted directly to FCC. FCC refresh their map twice a year. So that can be an opportunity for you to directly submit those missing locations. We ourselves are still working on the missing location in every quarter to make sure we are submitting that missing location data to FCC. We can help you with that process. So feel free to reach out. So if you need additional guidance on that. Let's look into the timeline. So whole BEAD challenge process as per the NTIA guideline need to be completed within 120 days. So we as a state broadband office, we will be posting a list of documentation which include the served location, unserved location, underserved location as per the category, the community anchor institute list, which will define each category, and under each category, which location currently have 1 gig symmetrical service, means community anchor institute served, versus which does not have 1 gig symmetrical connection. Also, we'll release the training documentation and the training materials for this challenge process. The portal which we are mentioning is currently under development by a company called Sunborn and AppGeo. They're developing the same kind of portal for multiple other states. So we'll be hosting a demo for that tool next month, beginning of next month, I think kind of end of first week of March or beginning of the second week of March. That's where we'll be training folks that how to select multiple or one household and submit a challenge to that appropriate category. So this is the timeline we are planning to follow for this whole process. I want to add one note here that the whole challenge process depends on when the volume 1 initial proposal will be approved by NTIA. Both of our volume 1 and volume 2, where you provided your feedback or public comments, is currently under review with NTIA. And we cannot start the challenge process until volume 1 gets approved by NTIA. As far as we know that we are very close to get an approval from NTIA, but still, we cannot kick off the whole challenge process before NTIA approves it. Having said that, there is no restriction around that. If we can post the training materials, eligible areas, eligible locations, and everything. So we are planning to post all these location last week of February. We'll be posting a series of documentation, a step-by-step process, what challenge process is, some documentation around the challenge process published by NTIA as a narrative by last week of February and beginning of the last week of February. And then we will be opening up the portal for registration and a speed test module on March 1st. That's the tentative timeline. So if we open that here on March 1st, it will be open for 15 days. Assuming we will get an approval from NTIA on our volume 1 by March 15th, we will start the actual challenge process on March 15th. If we get an approval on March 14th, we'll start the challenge process on March 15th. If you recall from our volume 1, you will see that we went with a 90-day module where we allocated 30 days for the challenge, 30 days for the rebuttal from the ISPs, and 30 business days to make a decision about those challenge and rebuttals. During the public comment period, we received comment and we did some update on the timeline. And we wanted to make sure that communities local government, tribal government is getting the maximum amount of time we can play along within this 120 period to make sure they are taking the most benefit out of this challenge process. So we changed the 30 calendar days to the 60 calendar days. So now the local government or tribal government will have an opportunity of 2 months to submit a challenge. So if we start on March 15th here, we'll most probably stop accepting challenge on May 15th, which is 2-month window. Then the ISPs will have 15 days period to submit a rebuttal against that challenge. The NTI minimum requirement is 14 days. So we went with 15 days. And once we have the rebuttal and the challenge, SCA or State Broadband Office will make a decision within next 30 business days. And then we will update the whole state broadband map and the FCC map as well. That request will send to NTIA, and all of these will be reviewed by NTIA, and NTIA will provide us their final determination. I want to make sure that the whole challenge process is a very fair and transparent process. So for the sake of transparency, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, at this point, when we are making the determination, at this point, we'll be publishing all the challenges and all the rebuttal within the boundary without compromising any personal information. I understand that data sovereignty is a big thing for the tribes, and we want to respect that. So please feel free to send us an email that what data will be published as part of this challenge, because as far as I understand, if you are submitting a challenge or a citizen from a citizen is submitting or resident is or subscriber is submitting a challenge, their name, IP address, and the address will be exposed, which is currently already in the map. So it's already currently in the BEAD map and in a public map, but I wanted to highlight that for you so that you are all aware that what data will be posted on public, along with their address data or street data, which is all public information. So all of this information will be posted, and the rebuttals from the ISPs will be posted for the transparency's sake. Once everything is executed at this point, when we release the final determination that what challenges are accepted, what were rejected, and why, that will be posted for 60 days before we open up the whole state for BEAD dollar distribution. So there are multiple steps in this process to make sure this is a fair and transparent process, and we are not leaving behind a single unserved and underserved household, which was wrongfully identified. Here is a small flow chart or a diagram that how the challenge process will work. It's a complicated process. We as a team tried to make it like simple. Please feel free to let me know if there is any question. So you as a challenger at this point will submit a request to register in our portal, and State Broadband team will review that. As I said, that tribal ISPs and tribal nonprofits who's specifically working on tribes and the tribal governments will be eligible to register. Then you submit a challenge. If the challenge does not, if it's a speed test challenge and it does not match with the BSL, the speed test has a requirement, meaning when it comes to the speed test, the resident need to take or subscriber need to take a speed test in 3 different day in 3 different time frame. Sorry, 3 different day in a certain time frame. That speed test, if that did not meet the expectation what NTI set for the State Broadband Office, it will be reviewed and it will mark as a evidence incomplete or sufficient, and it will be stayed on the SCA server. We will not be deleting or erasing any challenge process or scrapping any challenge submission. Doesn't matter if it's fully satisfy our requirement, doesn't matter if it's incomplete, doesn't matter if it's complete or in any form. All these data will be saved in ACA portal so that in future reference or future analysis or future public data request, it can be available to anyone. So all these challenges will be saved on ACA portal. If it's a valid challenge, State Broadband Office will review that. And if it's an acceptable challenge, we will send that to the ISPs. And ISPs in this case will have two options. Either if they decide not to respond for 15 days, this address will be open for BEAD funding and the BSL map will be updated here. However, if they respond to these challenges, we will accept the rebuttal and we will we'll go through an adjudication process where we'll be evaluating the rebuttal as well as the evidence or challenges came from the tribal government or eligible entity. And then we'll determine our decision here and we'll complete the challenge process. The map will work in a real-time process. So if you log into the map or the portal will be releasing, you'll be able to see that who submitted a challenge in your community or from your tribe, when it was submitted along with the timestamp, and what was the decision, or if an ISP already rebuttal to that challenge, or what was the decision made from the State Broadband Office. So it's a real-time map. So you can see all these updates in real time. So anyone who's registered in the portal will be able to see those information.
Sandeep,
Yes.
I just wanted to see if you could clarify a little bit for our tribal folks, and maybe talk about what happens if a tribal government has a contract and they're serviced by a non-tribal ISP and they go and submit their information and maybe the data that comes back, like the speed data, doesn't match up with what they thought they were getting as far as, it's not as fast as they were maybe initially promised through that non-tribal ISP. What happens there? Can you kind of walk us through that real quick?
Absolutely. So let me go back to my previous slide in this case. So when you submit a challenge, and that challenge, we have total 11 module or 11 subset of the challenges. Nicole Umayam from NTI will be discussing on the last half of the presentation. So when you submit a speed test challenge, and if it's not meeting, and let me give you a real life example. If there is an existing service provider on your tribe, which is a fixed wireless service provider, sometimes theoretically it's possible to meet 100/20, but practically it's not possible. So if there is a speed test data taken by the resident and that was submitted to State Broadband Office, which should definitely meet the standard from NTIA, taking it in 3 different days, then we will evaluate that. If we see constantly it's failing to meet 100/20 requirement, 100 is download and 20 is upload, we will open up that area or that BSL for BEAD funding. So this is exactly, I think that's the most timed question. The reason it's put in place, this challenge process by NTI, it was a very thoughtful decision. And the reason it was put in place so that any network which is not performing as it should be can be challenged. Any ISP which is not performing as it should be can be challenged. Any federal commitment you have already on your land, but there is no plan to build or in a verge of defaulting, you can challenge so that we are not leaving a single household behind. It's a once in a generation lifetime opportunity. If we are not deploying the BEAD funding and we are leaving that area open and you are not getting the sufficient speed dictated by NTIA, or at least the speed you need to participate into the modern society when it comes to workforce, telemedicine, and distance learning and other crucial programs for historically unserved population in tribes, it is very important. It's a crucial step for you to make sure. One thing I would say, and that's my personal experience after spending countless hours in the maps, we have few tribes which is close to Metro Phoenix and Metro Tucson. They are developing their way ahead of other tribes in other tribal areas. I think most of the tribes in the state of Arizona, a significant number are unserved or underserved. So the speed test challenge, if you don't have any provider in your tribe, and basically there is nothing, there is zero provider, you don't need to submit any speed test challenge. All you need to make sure there is not a federal commitment where the subrecipient has no plan to build and blocking your BEAD funding in that particular area. That's you need to make sure. If that subrecipient is defaulting or already defaulted, that's something you would like to inform us, because we want to open up that area for BEAD funding. Or if you did not provide any letter of consent, that's something we would like to know. So those are probably there is a federal commitment, but it's not meeting. There are a lot of federal commitment is not meeting 100 by 20 requirement. It's only meeting 25 by 3. There are old USDA project which was disbursed in 2020 but is only meeting 25 by 3 requirement. So you are eligible for BEAD funding in those areas as well. It can be for a network upgrade, or it can be a new set of network if nothing was deployed. So we would like to know that. However, if you are in a community or part of the tribal government which doesn't have any ISP at all and didn't have any kind of service before, then I don't think the speed test challenge will make any difference on your side, because it's historically unserved or underserved. But if you are served and basically there are some ISPs, but you feel like it's not going to meet the 100 by 20 requirement, then it will be a oath to take a shot to submit a challenge.
One more thing here, and I just want to make sure that you can answer this now, so it's more of a conversation.
Sure.
But an anonymous attendee said the biggest conundrum is satellite providers. They might be able to provide service, but it can be expensive or unreliable, and you can't test it without a subscription.
Yep. So if you look into our volume 1 and 2, we actually marked satellite and unlicensed wireless as a non-reliable broadband delivery. So if you have a satellite connectivity in your home or a DSL connectivity in your home or certain areas, it doesn't matter what a speed threshold they're meeting, or unlicensed fixed wireless, it's allowed for BEAD funding. So there is no question there. We are just talking about a existing cable connection or fiber connection or a licensed fixed wireless connectivity. Those are something you can submit a challenge. But if it's a satellite, you don't even have to submit a challenge for that. Great. Thank you, Candace. So we will, as I mentioned before, there are some process in place will be implemented as part of the transparent, evidence-based, and fair expeditious challenge process. And this is a requirement coming from NTIA. So we will publicly post all the documentation explaining the challenge process once the volume 1 get approved by NTIA. We'll publicly post all submitted challenges and rebuttals before the final determinations are made. We'll host a public website which you can register, or you will be able to register as a local tribal government and tribal ISPs or nonprofits once it's posted. And we'll make sure all the personally identifiable information and proprietary information are masked when we are posting this data. Those will not be released. If you need additional information, please send us an email. We only have 1 hour for this webinar, so I'd be happy to set a one-on-one call and discuss more about this. But these are the structure. These are the requirement coming from the NTIA. Also, we'll make sure in this process, we are informing our local government, nonprofit organization, and ISPs regarding the process and the deadline. So today's effort, what we started today, is just a start of this ongoing education and informing session to our tribal government and tribal ISPs. Every single month, we'll be hosting webinars. You will be seeing a lot of these same templates or same PowerPoints again, but this is a continuous effort to make sure that you are fully aware about the challenge process, or we are answering your questions. So in upcoming month of March, April, and May, we'll be keep hosting this kind of webinars. So there will be opportunities. We will be recording these sessions and posting that in the website, and also any question and answer which was collected during this session. Also, this PowerPoint will be continuously updated and posted in ACA website, along with all the data sets need to be published before we start or officially kick off the challenge process. So if you are not part of our emailing list, please subscribe. So you will start receiving notification from us. Going forward on the next slide, there are 11 types of BEAD challenge, and I would like to welcome Nicole Umayam, who will be able to give you more information on the 11 type of challenges you can submit to the State Broadband Office.
We are promoting her to a panelist so that she can speak easier. Thank you for your patience.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. I can't see who's attending, so I'd reach if I could, but I'm glad that you're all joining us today. I'm not going to take up too much time because I want everybody to have questions. Let's see. Could you, whoever's got the slideshow up, could you stop sharing so I can bring up mine?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Okay. Same information, new slide. So we're talking about all the different types of challenges here. So I just wanted this group to know that there's actually 11 different types. So a lot of the emphasis is on enforceable commitments and speed tests, but there's actually a whole suite of options that are available for eligible challengers. So the first one, and really what the premise of the whole process is to challenge the availability of the broadband service. So that's truly like if that service is not offered for that location that we have. So how do you present that information? You can do it through a screenshot of the web provider. If you have documentation that the service to that location was refused by the service provider, that's within 180 days of that request to start service. You can also document failure to schedule or install service that way, or any type of correspondence with the service provider that says that it's not that service is not available to that area. That would constitute an availability challenge for the location. And then, of course, the big topic of today is the speed challenges. So this is where that actual service that you're subscribing to at that location is falling below the unserved or underserved. So that's below 25.3 or below 120. And this is what's documented in those speed tests. And we can chat a little bit more about that if we have other questions. This is really on the subscriber to be a pretty active participant, like taking that speed test on 3 different days throughout the time through the state's portal, and having that be submitted on, by the local government to the state portal that way. If the provider then is able to show countervailing evidence that it's available, then it gets kicked back to the state for that adjudication phase. Another interesting type of challenge, which I'll be curious to see if we have that reported, is to challenge based on latency. For the purposes of BEAD, reliable broadband service, which is what this funding is set out to do, has to meet a minimum, or has to provide service at less than 100 milliseconds latency. So that's pretty speedy. We're talking about ensuring that there's limited lag time on something like a Zoom call or a voice call over the internet or something like that. So really great. We had the question about satellite. One of the reasons why satellite service is not considered reliable broadband service for BEAD is because of that latency, because of the amount of time it takes those data packets to get up to the satellite and back to the to your home computer, it takes too long. And so that's why wholesale, it's not considered broadband service here. There's also a possibility to challenge if the only available plans have unreasonable data cap allowances. So the FCC actually defines these data caps at 600 gigs per month. So anything that imposes a data cap below 600 gigs per month is eligible for a challenge. The type of technology is another one. So if if a location is listed as being served by a fixed wireless service, but we know that really the only available type is satellite, like in some rural areas, that's also eligible. It's possible that a location could be listed as residential, but that service provider is actually only available for commercial businesses. That's an eligible challenge. The other big one is the enforceable commitment. So this is where the challenger knows that there's a planned build out by that June 30th date to deploy broadband in that service area. So similar to planned services, which may or may not be about a federally binding broadband service commitment. There can be negotiations with the state where the service provider, perhaps they're using private capital to build out a network, but they want to ensure that they're able to serve that area. They can enter into an enforceable commitment with the state to ensure with penalties imposed that they would be providing service to that area. The inverse is also true if the map lists a location as part of an enforceable commitment, but it actually won't be. This would be things like where maybe your tribal broadband connectivity program grant is building out 80% of the households, but because of that award, 100% are showing as being served. You can go back through and ensure that BEAD can pick up the remaining 20% of those households. There's also the possibility to challenge around anchor institutions. So this is either to say that this anchor institution was missed and to recommend that the state considers it as eligible for BEAD funding, or you can actually take off that anchor institution if the state's layer is incorrect. So maybe there was a senior center located here in the past, but now it's a private residence, or maybe now it's a different type of business and would not be eligible as a CAI. I think I can't tell if we have any questions there or not.
There are no questions at this time. However, just a reminder, there is a Q&A box down in the lower portion of your screen if you do have one. Oh, and conveniently, we just got one. Let me go ahead and read it to you, Nicole. It says, can ACA provide an example of the process? For example, how to navigate the Excel sheet and what it would look like to search through the Excel spreadsheet, find a location to challenge, issue a challenge, especially for the enforceable commitments. Maybe Sandeep would like to take that one instead.
Sure. So there will be two ways you can submit a challenge. So our challenge process portal map, and we'll be hosting the portal operational know-how webinar next month. So please stay tuned for that. But I'll try to explain how we are seeing the demo map on our side. It's almost going to be identical like the FCC broadband map, which is available today. You'll be able to zoom into the household level. You can submit a challenge for one household, or you can submit a challenge for bulk of household. So you will have two options. You can drag and drop your mouse and select multiple household, or draw a polygon around the household, and you'll be able to download that whole household's data as an Excel spreadsheet. Or there will be Excel spreadsheet available, and if you have a Tier E license, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, it's for the government, local government, it's Tier E license from CostQuest. you can use the Excel spreadsheet or template we'll be uploading and use that spreadsheet to update a bulk amount of challenge. Like you can challenge in our portal from one household to all the way 10,000 household in one go. You can select a massive amount of number and upload that into the portal when you are submitting a challenge. So there are multiple ways to do that. I think the most user-friendly way to do that would be drag and drop, use your mouse to create a polygon around the households you are planning to submit a challenge. If you are not super savvy about the GIS process and technique, and then submit a challenge, write your reasoning, which category you are submitting a challenge. And if you still have questions, we'll be hosting these webinars definitely, but along with that, we'll be hosting office hours where the tool provider app geo or who's building the consultant company or contractor company who's building this map and a state broadband office will hold a 30-minute webinar, 30-minute slots for office hours. You can register, you can talk to them about or talk to us about the technicality of submitting a challenge, and we'll be happy to navigate you through this process. State Broadband Office will be also be able to help you with some GIS stuff if it's needed. But at the end of the day, we are the executor of the challenge process. So we'll not be able to tell you which is a valid challenge or not, but we'll be able to help you submitting this challenge on the right portal into right category and et cetera, et cetera. Can you expand on no enforceable commitment? I will just quickly explain that. If you log into if you log into the FCC broadband map and you go to the federal broadband funding tab, you will see and zoom into your area, you will see if there is a federal funding directly allocated for your tribe. So I want to use an example, but I want to be careful at this point too. So, an outside ISP which has no contacts, connection, or any kind of agreement with the tribes were allowed at some point to apply for funding on a tribal land without any consent from the tribal government or tribal ISPs. So one of those kind of funding is definitely RDOF. You might have RDOF commitment on your tribal land without you knowing anything about it. Probably you got contacted by that ISP by now, or probably you have never heard from them, or they have no intention to build. Before even they build, it's not an option for any other local government, but it's an option for the tribal government. You have ability to not provide them your consent. That will open up that area for federal funding, for BEAD funding. So, but that need to be submitted as a challenge so that we can determine that if it's something we can take off from the map and you can submit a challenge. You can basically receive BEAD funding for that segment. Nicole, if you want to add something on top of that, because I think the enforceable commitment is the most pressing thing for the tribes, because most of our tribes are unserved. I'm not super worried about the speed test challenge or latency challenge or something. I'm more worried about the enforceable commitment, and that might block us from deploying BEAD funding in certain part of the tribes because those are federally committed by other funding.
Yeah, I think with this one, it helps to think about what is an enforceable commitment to understand, the challenge type that this is not part of an enforceable commitment. So this is any commitment to deploy qualifying broadband service to that location that's through a grant, a loan, or some sort of guarantee provided by the state to the provider of that broadband service. So this is state or local funding. It's grants through the Department of Agriculture. So that's something like Reconnect. It's any high cost universal service. So that's something like RDOF funding through the FCC, so long as those are going to be deployed as recommended. So if you have evidence of that award being in default, or knowledge that service is not going to be deployed by that June 30th deadline, or whenever that enforceable commitment is holding them to, that can then be challenged. ARPA grants, CARES Act grants, those are also considered enforceable commitments. in all of their various forms, the capital project funds as well. And any way that that project, whether it's partially funded or wholly funded through a state, federal, or otherwise type of grant, is considered enforceable commitment. On tribal lands, anything that meets all of those criteria, but was not approved through a tribal government resolution, which would be a letter of resolution or however it works in your own tribal government, that is considered to be not a qualified enforceable commitment because the service provider did not acquire consent at that time of the award. So that's a tool for tribes to actually open that area back up for BEAD. So that's a little bit different than I think the intent of this type of challenge, which is more about this whole 100% of this project area is listed as going to be served at the end of this, but we actually have a couple of locations here and there that are not going to be covered. That's one way that this works, but on tribal lands, it becomes a little bit more of a tool for the government to actually demand that the state takes the consent seriously and that's factored into this deduplication process.
So there have been a couple other questions, if we're ready to do those. Mala with the State Library asks if there are new tribal library buildings coming up this year and next, how can we add it?
That's a good one. It has to be a broadband serviceable location listed on the National Broadband Map from the version that the state is going to pull for the challenge. The community anchor institution layer is sort of the state's big contribution to this because the FCC doesn't necessarily define those. So it's, because you don't have that location to subscribe to service at the time of the challenge, you're not going to be able to submit a challenge according to one of these 11 types if that building does not exist. That's kind of the unfortunate part of it. It depends on the status of that build. I also want to take EJ's question about non-tribal spectrum licenses counting as a prior commitment. This one has to be, again, you're challenging at the location level. So you're not challenging if there's, service availability for like a giant area of land. The challenges are occurring at the location level. So depending on what that use of spectrum looks like, if it's licensed, if it's a hybrid of an unlicensed and licensed network, it really depends on that technology type coming into the locations on if it would be considered served or unserved or underserved.
So there's another post from an anonymous attendee. The question is, does Arizona have grants to help tribes to tackle the challenge process for their land mass? I can provide a little bit of information about this. We are planning to do some overhauls to our website, and one of the things that we are hoping to add is a listing of additional funding sources, more for the digital equity side of things, but we'll be tracking available grants from both perspectives. So that will be in addition to our website in the coming months. Does anyone have any other comments to that one?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any mechanism to provide grants to help with this process. It was not an allowed expense we can provide. We can definitely help you with your mapping effort, provide GIS support for future grants application before the procurement open. But this is not something we'll be able to do because we are the executor at the end of the day of this whole challenge process. It will all come to us and we will determine. So unfortunately, there is no scope at this point.
There's also one final comment from the anonymous attendee that says, just to be clear, a location that can only be served by wireless point-to-point or satellite is not a BSL, correct?
Well, that's pretty close. It is a BSL. It's a location that shows up on the national broadband map, but it is not considered a served location. So
There you
it
go.
would be classified here as unserved.
Okay. And
And
unserved
the other question
is eligible under the BEAD funding for
and underserved. Yep.
unserved and underserved.
There
Thank you.
was the question I like kind of new to all of this, so I'm like answering questions and then they disappear. But there was one about oh gosh, now I don't even know.
The business
If
connectivity.
BEAD, yep. Other deployment programs may serve businesses, but the BEAD program really requires states to serve the unserved and underserved households, and then if funding permits, to serve anchor institutions. So that's the schools, libraries, health centers, public safety, and then the other designated places that Arizona dictated. So this does not create direct service to business, but as you can imagine, you're putting fiber down the street that's available for a business to subscribe to, even if the state's commitment is the location level for households.
Absolutely. I mean, we will not be able to pay for connecting the businesses, but in a lot of cases, what happened when it going through a community and a business is in between, and if that's something the ISPs are connecting, that's a different case. But the BEAD funding is for unserved and underserved household, then community anchor institute, and if there is any leftover, we'll probably end up investing in MDUs and everything.
Okay, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the post that Perla made in the chat that if there are any lingering questions that were not answered, to please email us at broadband@azcommerce.com and we will be able to take those offline. Mala, I wanted to let you know I tracked your questions regarding ACP and we will reach out to you on those as well.
Thank you so much, everyone, for participating, and stay tuned. There are more webinars coming on our way. Feel free to send us any question you have, and we'll be happy to help you with that process.
Thank you, Sandeep. I'm going to go ahead and just close out with a few words. I will be sending an email out later today. It'll have some more resources that I had sent out last week, and we'll definitely stay in touch. My email is in the webinar chat, so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.